Hi, class. For some of you, this will be the first lecture that you've been listening to. For some of you who listened to the supplemental lecture, yay! I'm proud of you. You went above and beyond. And those of you who haven't done so yet, if you practice in the supplemental week, you will be given, I will erase one of your weeks of zeros from before the coronavirus. And our transition into our online classroom. If you decide that you want to participate in the supplemental week before. Anyway, for those of you who this is your first time tuning in, I've taken a lot of time to try and decide how best we could handle transitioning our classroom, which is very much, relationship, human-oriented, into a virtual classroom. So what we're doing is I've invited 3 of our community members into the classroom to participate in discussion with me. So they're reading the works that we will be reading, and they'll be discussing those works with me for your enjoyment. Anyway, I'm going to ask that they go around the room and introduce themselves.
I'm Lance. I'm an MBA student and the owner and editor-in-chief of a book publishing company.
I'm Sean, and I am a local high school teacher. History.
Yep. All right, cool. So the title of this web series is Learning During a Pandemic and Addressing Anxieties. We talked last lecture a lot about just how we're feeling in reaction to the COVID-19 crisis and just talking about how we've been feeling. We read literature that I curated that I think sort of deals with that same sort of sense of anxiety. And now I feel like today our first lecture needs to be about building ourselves up. So today we're going to be discussing Thoreau's Civil Disobedience. We'll be discussing The Poet by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And then lastly, we'll be looking at another poem by Walt Whitman, When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. So on the screen, we see that this is a passage from the American Scholar. And the American Scholar is derived from a speech that Emerson gave in front of a room full of Harvard graduates. And essentially what he's saying is that all of the education that you have learned here in this institution is worthless. And the quote that I've chosen for us to talk about is, "Help must come from the bosom alone. The scholar is that man who must take up into himself all of the ability of time, all the contributions of the past, all the hopes of the future. He must be a university of knowledges. If there be one lesson more than another which should pierce his ear, it is, the world is nothing, the man is all. In yourself is the law of nature, and you know not yet how the globule of sap ascends. In yourself slumbers the whole of reason. It is you to know all. It is for you to dare all. Mr. President and gentlemen, this confidence in the unsearched might of man belongs by all motives, by all prophecy, by all preparation to the American scholar. We have listened too long to the courtly muses of Europe. The spirit of the American free man is already susceptible to be timid, imitative, tame. Public and private avarice make the air we breathe thick and fat. We aim at low objects, eats upon itself. There is no work for any but the decorous and the complacent. Young men of the fairest promise, who begin life upon the shores, inflated by the mountain winds, shined upon by all the stars of God, find the earth below, not in unison with these, but are hindered from action by the disgust which the principles of which business is managed, inspired, and turned drudges or die of disgust. Some of them suicides. What is the remedy? They did not see in thousands of young men as hopeful now crowding to the barriers for career, do not yet see that if the single man plant himself indomitably on his instincts and there abide, the huge world will come around him. Patience, patience, with the shades of all the good and the great for the company and for solace and the perspective of your own infinite life and for work, the study and the communication of principles, the making those instincts prevalent, the conversion of the world. And I chose that quote to open up our discussion with civil disobedience because the relationship between Thoreau and Emerson is very well documented. Thoreau's inspired greatly by Emerson's call to be self-reliant, Emerson's call to discover the self, to understand the self. And so what are y'all's reactions to this passage?
It's a lot at one time, but I think what I guess got from it was what was written in the late 1800s, and it can still be applied to today.
Yeah, 1900s.
It's the late 1800s.
Yeah,
Late 1800s.
yeah. So
Yeah.
19th century. Sorry.
Yeah, 19th century. Like when he says, what does he say? Sorry.
I mean, for me, it's definitely when I read The American Scholar and specifically this passage, what he's calling for is we've had the Declaration of Independence and now we're having the Declaration of Scholarship, of independent scholarship. So we're not going to replicate Europe anymore. He's very critical, actually, and so it'd be interesting to have your opinion on this. He's very critical of us continually studying histories and criticisms, because those histories and criticisms are of what?
The past.
Past. And so it's not that you should never read them, but instead it's that you should not rely on them to always try to recreate the present. And so that's what we're getting at, is now we need to recreate, we need to re-understand, we need to reevaluate our society so that we can represent the morals of our current times.
Yeah, that's kind of it kind of goes with what I was saying, because it says the mind of this country taught to aim at low objects eats upon itself. So like for me, it's like a different way that he was looking at it, but for me today, it's like, what's the low object that we all can't seem to get away from? You know, that's kind of keeping us from this scholarship that we could have, because it's eating upon itself.
Yeah.
You know, it's like to get away from the things that numb us from wanting to go find the truth of whatever is going on in our society today. And that's would be the scholar's task.
Yeah.
To do
Yeah,
that.
the aim at low objects. I like that too. Because right before that talks about public and private avarice. Make the air we breathe thick and fat. Avarice is like another word for greed. It's actually one of the 7 deadly sins. So that's still rings true. I mean, this is kind of America formed around the idea of capitalism, and it's almost as if Emerson is already seeing scholarship headed down the wrong path as we let the avarice take over our country.
Definitely.
And it never stopped. And he's kind of calling for scholarship to rebound and not let that take over, which it did. So,
Or hopefully.
Well, I mean, not in science and math in America. This could also be applied to that when it says, Mr. President and gentlemen, his confidence in the unsearched might of man belongs by all motives, by all prophecy, by all preparation to the American scholar. We have listened too long to the courtly muses of Europe. The spirit of the American freeman is already suspected to be timid, imitative, and tame. So it's like it's not Europe anymore because we have a much more broad scope of the world. So instead of Europe, it would be global.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we are kind of still a little behind in the science and math. So it can still be applied to today, except it's more of a global perspective, I think. And we have to make sure that we're still pursuing those things, because this is before, we went to the moon and did those things, So it's
this
were the
is written
first.
post the Enlightenment era. So this is us coming out of Enlightenment, and now we're transitioning into transcendentalism. So we've had a surge scientific discovery, right? And so we're no longer wanting to only have that push towards logic and math and science. Instead, now we're wanting to also reconnect with the human soul, right? We're bringing in the importance of emotion back into our writing. So we'll see playfulness in science with this, but Emerson's very much calling us not to think of that as the only thing that measures intellect.
He must be a university of knowledges.
Yeah.
So if you continue there, the world is nothing, the man is all. In yourself is the law of all nature. And you know not yet how a globule of sap ascends. In yourself slumbers the whole of reason. It is for you to know all. It is for you to dare all. So he's not just calling for math and science. He's calling for a scholar who is well-versed in a university of knowledges.
Yeah.
He's kind of raising the bar of what scholarship.
I think to pull from what what I think all three of us are getting at is that I definitely see that scholarship and learning has become thick and fat and complacent because we were once the country of greatness. And now we do see that we are continuing to fall behind in education. I think that we can definitely make that sort of modern connection to the American scholar.
Well, I think you're exactly right, but kind of piggyback on what Lance was saying with that little line, he says, in yourself slumbers the whole of reason. It is for you to know to know all. It is for you to dare all. So it's saying you have it in you.
Yes, very good.
You just have to unlock it. Everyone has capacity.
And he's throwing that very specific example of globule of sap, and I don't really know why that is. And it's well, you should. If something interests you, you should pursue the knowledge.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, definitely. You're getting at, and I'm going to stop everyone now because we're getting at sort of the pillars of transcendentalism. It was a literary and philosophical movement associated with Ralph Waldo Emerson, Walt Whitman, and Margaret Fuller, asserting the existence of an ideal spiritual reality that transcends the empirical and scientific and is knowable through intuition. So what Emerson argues is that within all of us, we possess part or particle of God. And we'll look at that later on in the presentation. But so in us is a part of God, and it is our responsibility to pursue our own interest, not to be selfish, right? But instead to be self-reliant. And so in that pursuit of my own interest, I then come back to my community, and my community is enlightened because I've gone on that quest, that individual quest. So now let's get into civil disobedience. Transcendentalism is definitely a strong political, has very strong political ties as well as philosophical and spiritual ones. Thoreau, he's an interesting character. He's definitely not of the same status that Emerson would be. He really is able to support himself for a lot of his life as Emerson's groundskeeper. But he would consider himself to be a protege of Emerson. It's arguable, nobody's ever been able to prove it, but Thoreau may have actually been in that group of Harvard graduates that Emerson gave the speech to from the American Scholar. But now that we've been given just that sort of brief overview of a very long essay, let's look at some passages from Civil Disobedience. That government is best which governs least. I ask for not at once no government, but at once a better government. Right? So what is he getting at there?
Sounds like a very American idea. Being an American means to be free. I mean, coming from Britain, where in a lot of ways we were indentured servants to the king, we formed to never allow something like that to happen to us again. And we were successful. And I think that kind of trickles all the way through American history up to today. People like to be left alone in America. That's sort of, it's kind of who we are foundationally. And if you compare our government to a lot of other governments in the world, in a lot of ways, that is sort of how America functions.
Yeah.
And I think those are kind of calls to keep America America in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Now we just get
Stole
this.
the history answer.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I mean, for those of you who don't know what laissez-faire is, it means hands off. So it's like you have to have the hands to set up the government, but then after that, it's like you let it do its thing.
Right.
And the government's there mainly to be more of a advisory thing than like if you need them, they're there, but it's not something that's supposed to control us.
Very good. Something I forgot to mention too is that when we shift from the Enlightenment period, we believe in the perfectibility of man, right? We once used to believe in the United States that man was inherently evil. Enlightenment, we begin to believe that he can be made good. He can be perfected, but it's through diligence, work, and modes of control. Right, which was why during the Enlightenment period we were really fascinated by creating systems of government, because we were creating systems that could operate and thus control and help perfect our citizens. Now, when we come into transcendentalism, and it's a huge shift, when we transition into transcendentalism, we believe that man is inherently good. And it's a huge shift in thinking, because we used to be damned by what?
Original sin.
Original sin. Very good, right? So man was inherently evil, and we needed to have atonement in order to overcome that evil. When we get to transcendentalism, we believe that man is inherently good, and that it's through his experiences that man can be made evil. And so we have all of a sudden this shift into trusting government. Trusting the individual, that we don't need big government to control us, because man doesn't need to be controlled, because man is good.
Can I do history?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because this is really this is what America is going to operate on for a long time until the 30s. Mm-hmm. Because even in the Great Depression in the 20s, when you have the big, stock market collapse of 1929, you have President Hoover doing this, saying that which is best is the government that governs least. He doesn't do anything because he thinks that the everyday citizen is going to help each other. So, but we see that sometimes it's a greater feat and you do need some support from the government. So I think it's interesting that it may not
we've
always
also
work.
already said, transcendentalism works because we're not governed by that. It's also a philosophy of simplicity. And so because we continue to detach ourselves and make our lives more and more complicated, more and more machine-like, we then have more needs that we aren't able to attend to because we've separated ourselves so much from that simple life. It's very close to Zen Buddhism, if we want to try and compare it, because we want to rid ourselves as much as we can of desire, because that's what keeps us ensnared, in a sense, which is a great transition. Great job, guys. The mass of men serve the state, thus not as men mainly, but as machines with their bodies. They are the standing army and the militia, jailers, constables, posé comitus, etc. In most cases, there is no free exercise whatever of the judgment or of the moral sense, but they put themselves on a level of wood and earth and stone, and wooden men can be perhaps be manufactured that will serve the purpose. So, what are we talking about here? What are your first reactions to it?
Talking about the hollow men.
Very good, and we're going to talk about the hollow men today. But yeah, so once we sell ourselves to the state, once we are no longer an individual, we become a commodity, right? And we can buy a commodity. So, for example, I make on average, with the actual amount of time that I work, about $5.75 an hour. Now, I'm lucky because I also can count things that I enjoy as time worked. But that means that I can be purchased and that becomes my value. And it also limits me because now I'm a part of the machine.
I get that. I was thinking of less about a price tag and you can be purchased than when you put yourself like at the service of your government.
Very good.
That you don't have any say in what you do.
Very good.
So it's like the Nazis. Like some people say, it wasn't my fault. I was following. People say that in the U.S. Army today. I was following orders. That's when all the atrocities in Iraq, when you're killing little kids for no reason. Well, you could say
you're right.
That happened in Vietnam too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you lose yourself.
Yeah, you become a cog in the machine.
Exactly.
Very good. Yeah, that there is no exercise of the moral sense because I am not doing this. I am doing my job. Mm-hmm. And so it's a way of us separating ourselves from our natural goodness, right? And so we know, we argue, like Thoreau's arguing, we know instinctively what is right, what is moral, because we are good. But we are trained to not be moral.
Or trained not to question.
Yes, very good. Questioning is inherently American.
Inherently individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we feel good about this one?
Mm-hmm.
All right. It is a man's duty. It is not a man's duty, as a matter of course, to devote himself to the eradication of any wrong. He may still properly have other concerns to engage him, but it is his duty at least to wash his hands of it, and if he give it no thought longer, not to give it practically his support. If I devote myself to other pursuits and contemplations, I must first see at least that I do not pursue them sitting upon another man's shoulders. I must get off him first, that he may pursue his contemplations too.
It's very similar. It's called to be a free thinker, be
Very
an
good.
individual. And if something is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
like, excuse yourself. Don't be part of it.
Very good. Very good.
Wash your hands of it.
So why does Thoreau write Civil Disobedience? Does anyone remember?
Because he doesn't want to pay his taxes.
Very good. And so he refuses to pay his taxes, and then he's thrown in jail. And we won't talk about how he gets out of jail because it ruins the whole mystique of Thoreau, right? But we have here, it is not a man's duty of a matter of course to devote himself to the eradication of any wrong. Thoreau refuses to pay his taxes because he does not want to support slavery in the Mexican-American War.
But he's saying it's not man's duty.
Well, he can't tell you what to do because you are transcendental. It is your responsibility first to pursue what you know to be right, to pursue your own interests, right? It is not a man's duty of a matter of course to devote himself to the eradication of any wrong. He may still properly have other concerns to engage him, but it is his duty at least to wash his hands of it, which wash his hands of it is not to participate in it, which paying your taxes is a means of participating in something that you believe is not right.
So he's saying don't do as the French do in the French Revolution and just knock everything down, but just don't do things that you don't think or that you think are
you should transcend anything that you think is against your own moral sense of goodness. And he believes that we will all have the same moral sense because we are all born good. If he gives it no thought longer, not to give it practically his support. If I devote myself to other pursuits and contemplations, you should. If you are a good transcendentalist, if you are a strong member of your community, you should be devoting yourself to your own pursuits and contemplations. I must first see at least that I do not pursue them sitting upon another man's shoulders. I must get off him first, that he may pursue his contemplations too. And now what is he referencing here? It's very indirect, but masterful. Slavery. Because what does slavery do? It stops the slave, who is their own individual, from pursuing their unique interests and contemplations. And so because of that, right, we are actually halting our own progress as a society because they are not able to go and pursue those interests and then bring it back to our community. And so what he's doing is he's showing us just how far that system has separated us from our own humanity. Because we are always pursuing our own interests, sitting upon the shoulders of another man. I know, Thoreau's so great. Unjust laws exist. Shall we be content to obey them, or shall we endeavor to amend them and obey them until we have succeeded, or shall we transgress them at once? Here, in the state of Tennessee, it is illegal for 5 women or more to live in a household without the presence of a man. Why?
Be a brothel.
Yeah, right? It's an outdated law, and it was created as a way of stopping brothels. Well, that's one of the reasons that we don't have sorority houses in the South, right? We have fraternity homes, and then we have sorority clubhouses.
I think it's interesting that, but you could still have a brothel, but have a male pimp.
Yeah,
that would be okay because a man's benefiting from it.
Oh yeah, that's a really
they
good
don't want
point.
the madam to benefit from it.
That's really interesting. Men generally, under such a government as this, think that they ought to wait until they have persuaded the majority to alter them. They think that if they should resist, the remedy would be worse than the evil. But it is the fault of the government itself that the remedy is worse than the evil. It makes it worse. Why is it not more apt to anticipate and provide for reform? Why does it not cherish its wise minority? It's pretty powerful. And I included a picture of Steve Avery. This is always when I have students who are taking notes on things that they need to catch up on Netflix whenever our class is over. Maybe you could do it now. But it's from Making a Murderer. And so Steve Avery is this man living in a very rural area of Wisconsin who is convicted of a brutal sexual assault with a deadly weapon, and he serves 18 years, which we won't get into the gender politics about the fact that that's a long sentence for that type of crime. We don't have time for that, right? But he serves 18 years because in order to prove that he is innocent, he must confess to his crime. That's how you prove your reform. He has to confess to his crime. So he spends an elongated time in prison until DNA evidence finally exonerates him and proves that he was innocent. Not done yet. The problem with this is that he is then later convicted of another crime, and part of the evidence that is used against him is his previous time in incarceration where he was innocent. And they say, even though he was an innocent man when he went in, prison changes you. And so he didn't come out an innocent man. Is it not the fault of the government that the punishment is worse than the evil?
Yeah, that was a great example. Yeah.
It's interesting that he's writing this how long ago?
Yeah, that's why your class is reading it, because it's still
relevant today.
Relevant, yeah. Yeah, unjust laws exist.
Shall we obey them?
Yeah.
Says they think that if they should resist, the remedy would be worse than the evil.
And it is.
But what does that mean if they should resist?
If they should resist, so it's one of the methods of which that the government keeps you from resisting, because it's worse than the evil.
I'm just kind of confused. Okay. Men generally under such a government as this think that they ought to wait until they have persuaded the majority to alter them.
Mm-hmm.
They think that if they should resist, the remedy
what does resist mean there? That's a good way of locating it. What do we think resist means there?
That's what I'm having a hard time figuring
out. I think a synonym would be disobey.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that if they should disobey the remedy, what's the remedy?
Well, for Thoreau, what's the remedy?
I'm having a hard time.
He's incarcerated.
That's the remedy, the punishment?
Yeah.
Would be worse than the evil.
Because how do you show that a government is unjust? How do you showcase that?
Well, you
become a victim of it.
Yeah.
And so is it not the fault of the government that the remedy is worse than the evil? Why do we not provide for reform? Right? Because we're still looking at it, right? In a transcendental system of thinking, we don't look at the person who commits the crime and think you are evil, because no man is evil. We look at them and we think, you have done something that is wrong. And so now we have to figure out why. So it's a system that would be a system of thinking that would be more apt to provide for reform, because it's not the punishment. Instead, it's to correct the wrongdoing. Does that make sense? Yes.
I mean, does a probably innocent man who goes to jail for, I think he ends up in there longer than 18 years.
Yeah, he's still incarcerated for the second crime.
Today. Yeah. I mean, it's upwards of 35 years he's been in jail.
Yeah.
But is that really an unjust law, or is that an unjust execution of the law? Yeah.
Well, it's unjust that in order to prove his innocence, he has to confess to a crime that he didn't commit. That's unjust.
Because what's coming in my head is like the civil rights movement, because it's obviously all civil disobedience.
Very good.
So is it saying like, so say the national sit-ins, the black college students from Fisk were sitting at lunch counters, right, and refusing to move. Yeah. So that would be the resistance, and the remedy
was that they were incarcerated.
They were put in jail, and that's worse than them just sitting there showing this absurdity of the law.
Yeah. Got it. Because it also requires that the individual be willing to go through. And I mean, I sit here today as a hypocrite because I'm aware very much so of the fact that there are laws that are unjust. But I'm not willing to be incarcerated for them.
Yeah.
Do we feel good about this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This one always gets everybody riled up, right? Class, I hope you're getting riled up too. If a government is maintaining unjust laws, people should at once effectively withdraw their support, both in person and property, from the government. They should not wait till they constitute a majority of one before they suffer the right to prevail through them. I think it is enough if they have God on their side, without waiting for that other one. Moreover, any man more right than his neighbors constitutes a majority of one already. All right, so we're getting into some transcendental math, and it's like kind of crazy. And normally I draw stuff on the board right now, but I'm going to see if I can figure out how I'm going to walk us through this with words. So, if I am just, and I am siding with my understanding of morality, if I am siding with what is good and not what I am being told to side with, especially if what I'm being told to side with is unjust, I am too. Because I have God on my side. Or more, I'm siding with that part or particle of me that is good. That is God. And so the person who is not siding with what is good is at a disadvantage because they are a nothing, right? Because they've lost themselves to the machine. They're no longer, to Thoreau, they're no longer a person. They don't really exist. They're just a part of a system. A cog. They are a cog. If 1,000, if 100, and I apologize for the typo, someday I'm going to correct it. If 100, if 10 men whom I could name, if 10 honest men only, if one honest man in the state of Massachusetts ceasing to hold slaves were actually to withdraw his co-partnership and be locked up in the county jail, therefore, it would be the abolition of slavery in America. For it matters not how small the beginning may seem to be, what is once well done is done forever. But we love better to talk about it. That we say is our mission.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's social media right there.
Yeah, definitely. Why do you say that?
Well, for it matters not how small the beginning may seem to be, what is once well done is done forever, but we love better to talk about it. That we say is our mission. So it's like we like to talk about things rather than do it. Mm-hmm. But actions speak louder than words.
Yes, very good. But do we really believe that, right? That if 1,000, if one honest man were
Mhm.
to rebel against the government, everything would change. I think, yeah, because they could be a symbol. But how many men are in jail and are never a symbol?
Lots of them.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah, so it is one area where we can be very critical of Thoreau's logic, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to. There's a really beautiful movie called Lady in the Water, and you should go watch it, class. But in the movie, M. Night Shyamalan is visited by a muse. And what the muse does, she's an actual muse in the movie. And so she comes to him, and he's at a point where he has writer's block, and so he can't think of where to go next. But her presence being there inspires him to go and finish the book. And the book that he's writing is called The Cookbook. And there's this really beautiful conversation that he has between himself and his muse, because she tells him that a young man is going to read your book, and he is going to become very inspired by your writing, and he is going to bring about great change and political revolution in our country. And part of it's such an emotional scene for me, but M. Night Shyamalan looks at his muse and he says, well, why does he not come and visit me? And it's because he's killed for how radical the cookbook is. And yet he still decides to go and finish the book. So it matters not how small the beginning may seem to be. M. Night Shyamalan will never benefit or even see any sort of change. And we could argue that maybe potentially no change comes from him. But it's what he leaves behind. It's the anxiety that he creates within our society that creates that change. And we see that ripple throughout.
Oh, you're talking about the importance of literature?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's exactly what good literature does.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a good movie does. That's what a good news article does.
Yeah.
It's
like
an idea.
An idea, and sharing the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's smiling at somebody in the grocery store.
Yeah, could be.
Or it's saying, excuse me, if you bump into somebody.
Yeah. It matters not how small the beginning may seem to be.
It's like the butterfly effect, too.
Yeah.
They might be a little too young for that.
Another great movie. You should go watch that movie.
Yeah. But it talks about how one, the idea is a butterfly flaps its wings, and then half the world around is a tornado or a storm.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the butterfly effect is. It's that one small change. That's interesting to think of just as a human.
Yeah.
I mean, you go through life and you're constantly making decisions of what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And these tiny decisions, you never know.
Yeah. Like Bandersnatch.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. We know Bandersnatch, don't we, class?
Know that.
Yeah. But so it's those small things,
Yeah, and I think, we talk about, does every single, person who is incarcerated against their own will or who is innocent of the crime that they've been convicted of, if we take away people's voice, we take away their ability to escape that reality. Yeah. And so that is how you lose the ability to change your surroundings, is you can't articulate it. Mm-hmm. The irony of that, we're reading this. I mean, Emerson, every time I teach Emerson, I love Emerson, but oh my God, Emerson would be so annoyed that I'm still teaching Emerson.
Yeah.
Because I'm relying on the past in order to articulate my present.
But what is once well done is done forever.
Yeah, sorry, you told us both things.
But yeah, that connection to social media, beautiful, beautiful connection. Definitely. I always think about the Bring Our Girls Home movement.
Yeah.
Only half of them came home, but we felt good because we put hashtag Bring Our Girls Home. Under a government which imprisons any unjustly, the true place for a just man is also in prison. Cast your whole vote, not a strip of paper merely, but your whole influence. What he's talking about there is, he cast his whole influence and he was incarcerated. And again, I like to think of, oh no, that movie just escaped me. Stranger Than Fiction. That the young lady who's the protagonist of that movie, the whole reason that she's in it is because she refuses to pay the portion of her taxes that goes to funding war. Great movie. I told you, a lot of good movies come from this lecture. Sorry you didn't get to hear it in class. A minority is powerless while it conforms to the majority. It is not even a minority, but it is irresistible when it clogs by its whole weight. And so your connection to the civil rights movement is perfect because Martin Luther King is very much, he comes up with a peaceful resistance because of civil disobedience. Mm-hmm. So that connection to the two is very strong.
Gandhi.
Oh, yeah. Probably one of my favorite quotes in English literature right now. Suppose blood should flow when standing up to the government or the majority in refusal to consent to unjust laws. Is there not a sort of bloodshed when the conscience is wounded? Through this wound, a man's real manhood and immortality flow out and bleed, and he bleeds to an everlasting death. Is that true? What does that mean? What is he getting at here?
Don't be a sellout.
Yeah, definitely don't be a sellout.
Don't sell out to the man. He's compromising who he is.
Yeah.
And he bleeds to an everlasting death because he's not living his life the way he wants it to live it. He's living it the way
he's being told to.
Yeah, the way he's being told to.
It's almost a call to war. Because he's saying, suppose blood should flow when standing up to the government. But that's not really any different than blood. He's saying when the conscience is wounded is equal to bloodshed. So either he's equating not standing up to dying for what is right.
Yeah. Or for me, I always read it as becoming apathetic.
That's what I was about to say. I think he's saying being apathetic is just as bad as death.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of what I meant.
Because you can no longer, once you just accept that reality and you no longer, in your own way, fight against it. I think that, again, as a transcendentalist, you would have to find what your own variety of resistance is. And so how do you continue to find purpose? How do you continue to fight against just allowing yourself to become a part of it? You continue, you rage. To go back to our previous lecture, you rage against the dying of the light. You fight. Do not go gentle into that good night. Oh, we'll skip that one. You can read it if you want. But we are going to transition into a different sort of mindset. So we've been looking very much at the political connection that transcendentalism has. And now we're going to start looking at the more spiritual connection that transcendentalism has. So I want us to take just a couple minutes and I want us to meditate. So are you with me? Are you willing to? Okay, so we're going to meditate.
Yay!
Okay, and you're going to meditate too, listener. Everyone close your eyes and just listen.
Today, I summon to my life a positive mentality through which I can let go and be at peace. Behind my closed eyelids, the cool, dark space is soothing, inviting me to feel calm and tranquil. As I draw in a deep breath, every cell in my body is activated and energized, and I can feel the life current run from the base of my spine right up to the top of my head, bringing me to a state of greater awareness. As I exhale, I release a strand of my essence, which merges with the cosmos. In this state, I am fully conscious of my entire being. I can see myself in the grander scheme of life, and I am an integral part of the universal ecosystem. Around every corner and in every experience, there is a miracle that I embrace. I see beauty all around me, from the copper coin glinting in the sun's rays to the panting dog smiling on the street corner. I'm grateful for life's little gems, and I am open to receiving blessings in abundance. Right now, I surrender control and accept my life just as it is, knowing everything is well and everything will be well. Through gratitude, acceptance, and understanding, I have cultivated a positive mindset. What I sow is what I reap. And today I choose to sow the seed of limitlessness. I choose to open the doors or build new ones behind which my greatest life lies. I am ready to fulfill my destiny, and I feel a sense of empowerment as I become aware of my breathing again and experience the cool, dark space behind my eyelids, which let in the light of my surroundings as I open my eyes again. I am joyous. I am open to feel joy.
All right, so what we just listened to, it's only 5 minutes. And what I found to be really interesting is when I was this to me, this small meditation embodies transcendentalism, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But did it feel like it took forever?
Forever? It felt longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah. Why?
I don't know. Meditation is always a bit of a spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of happens outside the realm of time and space.
I mean, when was the last time that you took 5 minutes to just sit and be restful and grounded?
I can't remember.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing that we need to start practicing, especially right now, because, again, we're entering into this time that is being referred to as social isolation. And, it could be very easy for us to fill our time where we used to be in class with screen time. And in a way, I'm asking you to do that because you have to now watch my lecture videos online, but you can also take some moments to be still. And that's really also what the journal writing exercises require you to do. It's 10 minutes where it's just you and the page, and you are allowing yourself the freedom to write. Because it's not, our culture does not allow us time to be still. And in fact, I think that that's what a lot of the anxiety is being brought up from, is because we are having to be still. We are having to take time alone, and we're having to not busy ourselves. So it also has a lot of strong connections with transcendentalism. So we're going to talk about the phenomenal versus the nominal. I pretend not to teach, but to inquire, and therefore cannot but confess here again, the external and internal sensations are the only passages I can find of knowledge and to the understanding. These alone, as far as I can discover, are the windows by which light is let into a dark room. For methinks the understanding is not much unlike the closet wholly shut from light, with only some little openings left, to little in the external visible resemblance or ideas of things without, which would they but stay there, and lie so orderly as to be found upon occasion, it would very much resemble the understanding of a man in reference to all objects of sight and the ideas of them. Whew, sheesh! What does that mean? Meetings?
Meetings? Yeah, that word always trips me up too.
I must think of Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
I pretend not to teach, but to inquire, and therefore cannot but confess here again. So I prefer not to teach, but to inquire. I like that because it's kind of how I teach.
Mhm.
I don't just give my students things, but you have to give them an idea and they have to think about it. And I ask some questions to inspire critical thinking. So it's not about just listening, it's about thinking and thinking of things in your own way and being able to process things.
Yeah.
To understand them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I run my business as well. I kind of, when people apply to be part of what we do, I don't give them a job unless I think that they can accomplish something without much direction.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's sort of similar because, normally, or not normally, but there's a lot of jobs out there where your manager will tell you exactly what to do and then how to do it. And you have to do everything exactly how they say, or you don't keep your job, pretty much.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of thought in business about the idea of autonomy. And what that means is working on something without any direction.
Mhm.
And there's actually, I forget the name of this company. It's a technology company in Australia. And every quarter, so 4 times a year, for 24 hours, they let all of their employees work on whatever they want to, however they want to. And all they have to do in 24 hours is report back with what they did. And in those 24 hours, 4 times a year, they come up with the most products. They solve most of their software issues. And basically, those 24 hours, 4 times a year, are the most productive 24 hours the entire year.
Wow.
And that's sort of what I base kind of my business on is if you gather people around you whom you trust, and you give them that ability to do it in the way that they see fit and how they want to see fit, you actually produce a better product. And for me, it's books. And that's similar to, not to teach, because I'm not coaching them. I'm saying, hey, here's this manuscript of like a 300-page novel.
Yeah.
Make this into something good. And that's it. That's their direction. And they work on it from home, and they do it at their own pace. For editing, for anything.
Yeah.
For my cover design, I say, here's a manuscript. Make some art. Make it pretty.
Yeah.
Do it. I trust you. Because what you're doing is you're telling them that you trust them to make the best possible thing.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the quote, I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're not teaching them because you're not assuming to know everything.
Exactly, and I'm learning from them.
Yeah,
I'm
you are inquiring.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what we always have to do is, like, once we believe that we know a subject, in a sense, we kill that subject.
Right.
Because we always have more that we could learn. Yeah, definitely. I love that you made that connection to the workforce. It's like things that we talk about in college don't only matter to college students.
That's for all your entrepreneur students.
There we go. And business majors, right? And education majors and nursing majors, right? Beautiful. Yeah. And I think that that's definitely part of what Locke is calling for, is that we have to always approach things with an open mind to be ready to learn. Because if we don't, we close the doors to perception. We lock ourselves out. We'll skip this one because we ain't got time. But here we are at nature. We're back with Emerson again. Crossing their common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky without having in my thoughts any occurrence of a special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear. In the woods, too, a man casts off his years as a snake his slough. And at the period soever of life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God, a decorum and sanctity reign. A perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, leaving me my eyes, which nature cannot repair, standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. The name of the nearest friend sounds then foreign and accidental. To be to be brothers, to be acquaintances, master or servant, is then a trifle and disturbance. I am the lover of uncontained and immortal beauty. In the wilderness, I find something more dear and connate than in the streets or villages. In the tranquil landscape, and especially in the distant line of the horizon, man beholds somewhat as beautiful as his own nature.
Yeah. Go outside.
Yeah.
Especially now when you have to be isolated, go find yourself a spot in the woods.
Oh, yeah,
if you
go
don't
for a
feel that
walk.
stuff, you're probably on your phone.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something in human nature that we all kind of get.
Yeah, actually, the Japanese have a term for it. It's called forest bathing. That everyone needs to spend time finding themselves and reconnecting themselves with nature.
Absolutely. Especially in America. We literally just talked about when was the last time you took 5 minutes to be still.
Yeah.
That's why I say this whole social isolation thing is a siesta for the country.
It is a siesta. Yeah, imagine if we had siestas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And use it as an actual break. Don't use it as a means to drown yourself more in Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But we see a lot of, again, transcendental elements. We have mean egotism vanishes, right? So that's selfishness. So we're being called to be self-reliant, to be in a way somewhat self-centered, but not to be mean egotism, right? So it's not selfish driven. Instead, it's curiosity driven.
I love the transparent eyeball.
Right. And so Emerson actually illustrates the transparent eyeball as this, right?
It looks
That's
like
his drawing.
Yeah.
Mikey from Monsters Inc.
And it's him actually. But that's what happens to us when we go into the woods and we really just disappear. We become just a part of our surroundings. We lose ourselves.
We see things that we don't see
Mhm.
usually. We open our eyes.
I mean, we're a part of it. The earth
see the
is
beauty in it.
every part of our body is from the earth, and the earth we will return, and
Yeah.
it's your family out there. You
Yeah.
know, it's you, it's everybody. You get so caught up with getting stuck in rush hour traffic and trying to find toilet paper that you forget. You do. I think
it's
people,
so true.
People constantly forget,
Simplicity.
the simplicity
Mhm.
of just of
Everyday
trees.
life.
Like you're all constantly bustling about. There's trees that have just they're in the same place.
I love
It's still.
the line where it says, "In the woods too, a man casts off his years as the snake his slough." So it's like
You're ageless too.
you're shedding
Yeah.
this baggage of
Yeah.
years, you know,
Mhm.
and you're just
You're here.
living. Yeah.
You're present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a beautiful, we have that approach. And again, transcendental. We have that approach, become childlike again. Be open to the newness of experiences, because that's the problem, is that as we grow up, we begin to think that we know things. And so those things become fixed and we no longer question them. Well, that means that we're also no longer growing. Yeah, we're no longer, really perceiving our reality in a sense. We're going to skip this one. Because we don't have time. But this is from the poet, which you should have read and we'll be having discussions on. But for poetry was all written before time was. And whenever we are so finely organized that we can penetrate into that region where the air is music, we hear those primal warblings and attempt to write them down. But we lose ever the anon, a word or a verse, and substitute something of our own. and thus miswrite the poem. The men of more delicate ear write down those cadences more faithfully, and these transcripts, though imperfect, become the songs of the nations. For nature is as truly beautiful as it is good, or as it is reasonable, and must as much appear as it must be done and be known. Words and deeds are quite in different modes of the divine energy. Words are also actions, and actions are a kind of words.
That kind of goes back to what Thoreau was saying.
How so?
Well, the actions and the words, and actions speak louder than words, but words are also calls to action.
Yeah.
So you can't just say words don't have meaning.
It has to be that perfect marry.
Yeah.
Again, that's very transcendental too. It's all about balance, right? We can't always be in the woods, right? Or we would be stuck in that moment, in that communion with muse, right? Nature is the muse of a lot of transcendentalists. And so we would never get anything done.
I thought of when it said the men of more delicate ear write down these cadences more faithfully.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I thought of?
Hmm.
I know y'all are probably too young to understand this, but Paul McCartney, the Beatles,
Yeah.
he would get a lot of his lyrics from when he was asleep.
Yeah.
And he would wake up and never remember the lyrics. He would only remember the tune. So he started having a journal right next to his bed.
Oh,
So
sleep
he
journal.
so he could wake up as soon as he got the idea and wrote it down. So to me, it's like he might have had the more delicate ear.
Yeah. Or he was closer to that, like, that sensation of things before our understanding of language sort of interferes with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's also critical of, what is language and how does language interact with our understanding? Does it change
It's
us?
also the limits.
Yeah, the limits
language.
of language. Because once we write it down, what happens?
Well, you have
We thus miswrite the poem.
right. You have the risk of substituting something of our own, because you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You can it's like you can hear it, but you can't say it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's he's speaking to the limits of language, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the duty of the poet. Poetry normally is much smaller than
Mhm.
prose, and because of that, every word is a choice. You need
Yeah.
discernment. Every word matters.
Yeah.
You can argue that for good fiction too, but I think it's more relatable to kind of see that in poetry.
Definitely.
I like how it says words and deeds are quite indifferent modes of the divine energy.
Mm-hmm. Why?
So if you when I first read it, it seemed like they are different. But then you're like, oh wait, no, he's saying that they're not different.
Mm-hmm.
They're both part of energy in this grand
Yeah.
scheme of nature.
It's that part or particle of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's that part of us connecting.
Yeah, I think that's really what he's.
Well, it's like to me, it's like he's translating the universe.
Yeah.
This is like when you're talking about Zen Buddhism. This is the American Zen.
Yeah.
It's transcendental. It's the very
Mhm.
first time it ever appears on this continent as
Mhm.
a major thought, and it's. I think Americans got here. We fought off the British, and then we started making our own money, and things became money.
Yeah.
And now you're getting into hey, we're all nature, man. And you see it come back in the 60s and the beats in the 50s.
Yeah.
I would
You
like
see
to
it in the
say,
modernists too.
let's acknowledge that it was not the first time in the continent.
No,
Yeah.
I said as a major
Yeah.
thought.
I'm just saying
Definitely.
because of the
Native
indigenous
Americans.
tribes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No,
In
this-
Americans,
this has
yes.
a lot. So
You're right.
Yes.
you
You're
could
right.
Just
argue
wanted,
that.
just in case anyone thinks that we're ignoring that.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, you
We'll
can
say
argue
American.
that Emerson derives a lot of his concept of pantheism, which is the belief in many gods, from Native American spiritual beliefs. So it is kind of like the marrying between the two. But it's definitely the first time that we see Europeans practicing any sort of
Right.
idealism like this.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful point.
Yeah.
The sublime vision comes to the pure and simple soul in a clean and chaste body.
What's the definition of sublime? That's what I need to-
So sublime, how we've talked about it, is the ability to just perceive and understand your surroundings as they are. So it's the taking in of both beauty and terror, and they're equal.
Yeah, so it says of such excellence or beauty as to inspire great admiration or awe.
Yeah. But it's not being ignorant of the darkness of the thing either, right? So it's like the ocean is how we've talked about it in our class, is that when I look at the ocean, I think of both the beauty of the ocean, but then also
Jump in.
the fact that there's creatures
that we probably never
larger
seen.
than my house
living under there
in the ocean. Yeah.
that we don't even know exists.
So the sublime vision comes from the pure and simple soul, again, coming from the ridding of yourself of desire. All right. So here we are. We made it, you guys. When I heard the learned astronomer. When I heard, sorry, I have this poem memorized. Walt Whitman, again, is one of the sort of pinnacles of transcendentalism. This is an excerpt from Song of Myself. I celebrate myself and I sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. So what Whitman is doing in this poem, which is significantly longer than what we're looking at, is he's evoking the muse, right? And his muse is himself. And he's celebrating himself because he is someone that deserves to be celebrated. And in doing so, he's also celebrating all of us, right? Because you too deserve to be celebrated because you are a being. And so in celebrating himself, he's also celebrating you because we are all worthy of celebration. And again, we see that same sort of playfulness with scientific language and discovery happening, atoms being used in a poem. That's pretty crazy. And then we get to this poem. When I heard the learned astronomer. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. So, what is your reaction to this poem? What is this poem getting at? When I heard the learned astronomer. Let's start at the beginning. First, go ahead. Sorry.
The one thing I noticed is the punctuation there, the spelling of learned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what is learned? Learned is someone who knows things, right? Someone who's studied up on
Very
whatever.
Good. Yeah.
So
does it feel positive though?
It feels positive.
Does learned feel like a compliment?
To me, it seems like he just knows what he's doing.
Is it the wise astronomer?
Yeah, like wise.
Do we think learned is the same as wise?
No.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
Because my answer was wrong. So tell me why.
Well, but I don't know, because I get that too, and I also think, I mean, Walt Whitman, late 1800s, he survived till the 1900s. I don't know. I mean, the astronomy, even today, you take an astronomy class, space is a hard thing to cope with.
Yeah.
And you have Walt Whitman, who thinks he himself is so great.
Yeah.
And that song of myself that's like 300 pages in a book form.
And he's talking about
He's
himself.
talking about himself for 300 pages.
Yeah.
I love
You
it. I don't
know,
know if
mine
it's
is.
that long, but
I
it is
mean,
pretty
he
close.
starts naming animals and stuff in there.
Yeah.
But he is now small.
Yeah.
Walt Whitman is now small because astronomy. If you look up, I think he is battling with the beauty of the stars in the night sky, which to him are beautiful and peaceful.
Right. So we're getting at later on in the poem, which is beautiful, right? We're definitely getting there because it's when I heard the learned astronomer, right? And so the I speaker is definitely doing something throughout this poem. He's experiencing something throughout this poem.
Yeah, like he
But
saw a lecture.
learned, yeah, right?
Learned.
He's attending a lecture series, which is just something that people would do during this time because, oh man, I'm tired of listening to Cletus play the same song on the banjo that I've heard 100 times. And there's this lecturer that's in town. I'm going to go listen to it, right? So it was just something that people did. It's actually how Mark Twain made most of the money that he lived off of because he squandered away most of his book earnings in really bad investment. Mark Twain did an entire lecture series on, the importance of penis size. But so that was just something that people would do is they would go and they would attend a lecture series. But the speaker in this poem is describing the astronomer as learned. And learned is not positive. Learned is that I do not teach, I inquire. This astronomer believes himself to be a teacher, if we want to look at it from that light. He believes that he knows. He's well-read. But his subject has died to him, in a sense. And that's what you were getting at, right? And I think that we can apply this to a lot of different disciplines, is that if we allow ourselves to lose our curiosity, if we succumb to apathy, right, that wound of the soul, we lose that relationship to our subject. So it's learning versus experience is a lot of this poem. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were arranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I sitting heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon unaccountable. No one is holding him accountable to his lecture. How soon unaccountable. I became tired and sick, right? Because I'm no longer holding this into account.
It's like what I'm thinking in my head is like Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The learner would be the guy's like he's just droning on and on and on about economics, but everyone's falling asleep.
Yeah, because it's not real. It's not alive for him. He's just going through the motions.
As opposed to the teachers that jump up and down and are really passionate and
I don't think it's just passion. I think there's a certain level of arrogance that this astronomer has.
Yeah,
because he believes he can add, divide, and measure the universe.
I mean, you should never consider yourself not a student
in
your life, even if you are teaching, and you two know that.
Yeah.
I tell our kids I'm learning American history along with y'all, so.
Yeah. Because there's more to learn. Even history, there's more to learn. Because more things come to light as time goes on. It's just what happens. But yeah, I get that. I also can kind of see him in the other light too. But I get what you're saying.
What?
Just that
well, it's definitely also our speaker is not connecting with the subject in this manner.
Yeah. He has to go outside and he would rather experience
it's shocking because he doesn't want to experience it.
He doesn't care about the data. Just let me go and experience
it. Well, it sounds like it was a really boring lecture.
Yeah.
But who, I
But
mean,
learned is not a positive word. A big thing specifically for transit. He's not the wise astronomer. He's not the knowledgeable
He
astronomer.
just knows how to read
He's
books.
the well-read astronomer.
right.
And so because he has read all of these things, he believes that he knows them. But really, he doesn't know them. He just can
I was
regurgitate
wondering
what
probably
he's
most
learned.
of astronomy from when Walt Whitman heard this lecture is completely wrong.
Right.
A lot of it.
What I think is, I'm trying to figure out, why did he choose the words he chose to hyphenate the E? Like, it's not all the EDs. It's learned, wandered, and looked. That's it. Not
you
lecture.
mean the apostrophe?
Yeah. Or not hyphenate, apostrophe. Why though?
I don't know. That's also, English was different back then, so I don't know what to say about that.
He might also be poking fun at the idea of meter.
Well,
Right. When I heard the learned astronomer, so the learned astronomer would be how we pronounce it without it, but because the hyphen is there, it's
Learned.
when I heard the learned astronomer, it becomes more fluid.
or it's even holds less water than putting the E there.
Yeah.
So you've got wise, learned with an E, and Walt Whitman's even taking away the E and putting that apostrophe.
Yeah.
But why would he do that with wander and look?
Because we're always getting to the next passage, perhaps.
I don't know.
You think it's more poetic form than like?
I think it's just a
Symbolist.
stylistic choice in order to play with meter, because so before, poetry is also very fixed, right? And Emerson calls for us to no longer be bound by the traditions of Europe. So then we see Whitman come on the scene and he abandons form, right? He doesn't write in sonnets. He writes in these things called catalogs, where it's literally just Whitman listing all the things that he wants.
Godfather of American Lit.
Godfather of American literature, yeah. But so this may be him playing with.
Yeah,
meter.
absolutely. Yeah, because you could read that as learned without the E there.
Learned.
But so then
But it
all of a
doesn't
sudden
matter in
we
Whitman
become
because
very
there's no form.
we become very spiritual, right? It's after we leave the lecture room. And then everybody here in the lecture room is applauding him, right?
He's like, meh.
Yeah, he definitely got mad. He got mad. He walked out before it was over, and
It's like, before I vomit.
he went, looked at the stars, was like, "Oh yeah, wait, I like the stars again." Yeah,
That guy made me hate the stars.
yeah, he
Damn
made me hate
him.
the stars. Yeah.
But so we come back to it. But so we look at that. The whole poem hinges on the lecture room, right? Because when we're in the lecture room, we're not siding with ourselves. We're not exploring our unique interests. And when we leave, that's when we're exploring ourselves. We're following our own mean egotism. How soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself. I love that. I wish that I could glide. I definitely don't glide like I walk. But here it's like becoming mystical, it's becoming magical, it's becoming otherworldly.
Whitman definitely glid.
Oh yeah, he could glide like the best of them.
Yeah.
But till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. And what does the word silence make you think?
Meditation.
Meditation, yeah.
Meditative.
Reverence. That's like something that always comes to me.
Reverence.
Mhm.
So we're in that state of perfect silence. That's the transparent eyeball.
That's nature too.
Yeah. So, class, and, attendees, if you'd like, we're going to do a 10-minute in-class free write. So what I would like for you to write about is, why is the night such a mystery? Why does it frighten so many? If day were dark and night was light, would it be the opposite for people? I look at the sky like this, and I am not afraid. I am inspired. How do you feel? How do the stars appear? Do they make you dream? What do those dreams look like? If they are nightmares, what do those nightmares instill? So what I want you to do is I want you to set a timer on your phone, and I want you to write on this idea for 10 minutes. And no, this will not count as the 2 you have to do independently, which is why I wrote 10-minute in-class free write, because this will be your in-class free write that you are doing at home. So thank you, Sean and Lance, for participating in our discussion, and I'll see you guys next week. Remember that there's an Ask Me discussion board for your professor, so if you have questions, feel free to post any questions there, and I'll make sure to answer as quickly as possible. Have a wonderful day, and go look at the stars. They're beautiful. Bye.
Yay!
That was good. Yeah. Good job, guys. Do you guys want to stop today and do?
Yeah, let's just do one today.
Well, we got to do